Well, it's not every day you're walking down the street in Perth, you look to your left, you see one of your favourite basketballers of all time, Carmelo Anthony. What's he doing in Australia? You look to your right, you see one of your childhood idols, Ben Cousins, on the other side of Carmelo. How did that all come about yesterday? We ran into each other.
It was...
G'day ball magnets. Today's episode is brought to you by My Muscle Chef. We all know how time consuming a high quality diet can be and how meal prepping can take a bit of time. I can definitely relate to this on a Sunday, preparing for the week. These are honestly a game changer, guys. Encourage you all to get involved. And guys, for the finals, have actually given us a massive discount. Very generous of them. You can get $120 off your first 6 orders using code BALLMAGNETS120 at checkout. Again, head to the website mymusclechef.com to get involved.
G'day, Ben Cousins here. You're listening to Ball Magnets.
He's a superstar. He is an absolute superstar, Tom Mitchell. Cripps at the back. Cripps is too good. Yes! Oh, how good was that?
Well, it's not every day you're walking down the street in Perth, you look to your left, you see one of your favourite basketballers of all time, Carmelo Anthony. What's he doing in Australia? You look to your right, you see one of your childhood idols, Ben Cousins, on the other side of Carmelo. How did that all come about yesterday? We ran into each other.
It was a chance sort of encounter, really. A mate of mine was mixed up with him coming out, and he picked up my son and a couple of his mates and brought him out to meet Carmelo. So they were stoked, and so I got the opportunity to shake hands with the great man. Yeah.
It was pretty cool, wasn't it? Rubbing shoulders with someone of that caliber. Like we, in Australia, I guess, we gravitate towards, if it's someone like myself, there's still people on the street coming up to you. But for us, I guess it's, you look at these global stars and you're almost that little kid who doesn't want to go say hi to them.
Yeah, it is. There was definitely a bit of that, and the world stage, I'm not a fanatical NBA fan, but I do follow it. And both my kids are playing at the moment. So the last few years, I'm getting more and more into it. So obviously well aware of what he's been able to achieve in the game. And it was great.
And it is like well known how popular you are in Perth. I was just staying at a friend's house and he will just randomly get your highlights up still to this day. We sort of went through that era of, when you're about 10 years old, you really follow your footy. That was sort of our generation. For Cripper couldn't be here today. He's too busy writing his speech for the Brownlow tomorrow and picking up cars. But you were sort of our generational player. But for the younger listeners who are out there, how would you describe yourself as a player? I know you don't want to pump yourself up too much, but what sort of player were you?
Footy's it's been such a big part of my life. It's for as long as I can remember, it was always all I wanted to do. And I think, it's the hard thing for a lot of people is to work out actually what you want to do. But for me, it was I grew up going to watch the old man play and train, and from there I learned to love it. So then, putting in the hard work, if you like, was the easy bit. It wasn't the opposite. It really was. I didn't see it as hard work. I just saw it as, just something I love doing. Yeah. So, I sort of, that held me in good stead. But, I was a midfielder. I think in the end, I think I became, a pretty good user of the footy and clean, which you need to be. It's a bit of a tough question.
Yeah,
mate.
it's hard to pump yourself up. But both sides, it looked like you had both sides. You could kick left foot from 50. The highlights package does plenty of favours when they pick your top 3 kicks. But left foot from 50, agile, more of a running type than an inside bull, you would say. Run all day, burst away speed, a few attributes I would say.
Yeah. And I had to sort of, I really had to work at my game, like I was saying, especially, coming into my middle teens and then on from there, I really had to work at those things to become good at them. Did a heap of sprint training, a heap of work on the specific game like running. I remember coming into the game, I look at these kids that come in now in their first year and are able to, on occasion step straight into midfield roles in their first year. That certainly wasn't something I would have been able to do, but was able to see that, with an obsessive type approach to my training that I became, in the next sort of 5 or 6 years, from just adequate, if you like, to someone that was really one of my strengths. I'd agree with you.
Yeah. No, that's good. And what about, like, because you only have to go back, or even probably now, the way you look and look after yourself. So there's that hard training component, but clearly your diet must have been pretty elite as well, which is obviously a big component of, to be an absolute professional. And it seems like you would take that to an extreme level.
Yeah, I did. It sort of went hand in hand with trying to be a great runner. Was that I also realised pretty quickly the importance of, or just the impact that an extra kilo or two would have on your aerobic capacity.
I reckon you can notice, like, I'm probably a bit heavier than what you played at. What did you play at, around 80, 82? You were pretty light.
Yeah, well, I was 80 and 80, 81.
So that's pretty light for these days.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Like very
big
light.
time. But it's, I was in my 4th or 5th year. I remember I was a month or so out from the round 1, and with the sports science guy, got on the creatine, and within less than a week, I think 3.5 days, I put on 3.5 kilos, and I did a beep test. This was our last beep test before round 1, and I just ran terribly. I'd had this perfect preseason up until then, and then Big Dean Cox, he was a good runner for a big fella, but he beat me in the beep test.
Do you remember what year it was?
I reckon it would have been 02 or 03, and I remember I still hadn't got my breath back, and I looked over to the sports science guy and I said, "You in the office now," and then I spent the next 4 or 5 months trying to lose it.
Yeah.
So I was pedantic about that, particularly from then on, because I felt heavy. I reckon to me anyway, I looked heavy, and it took away an advantage that I thought I had on some players. Yeah.
Well, the players that played on, you talk about your gut running, and speaking of gut running, you played alongside Juddy, who was one of the best gut runners of all time, and he's coming along to the Ball Magnets lunch tomorrow. And thanks to a few guys in the room, Croft and Mewey, for helping put that together. You'll be there as well. But what was it like playing alongside him, both from a work rate point of view? What did you learn from that aspect, but also working together? Because I assume one of you is going to get tagged each week. How do you acknowledge that as his teammate to help him, knowing that the next week it'll probably come back and return? Did you have those conversations?
Yeah, well, it's, it was by that stage, we had, a really strong midfield. There was a heap of us that could go through there. I ended up, for a few years there playing predominantly at half forward, for a while, because of the luxury of having, Kerr and Judd and Braun, Fletcher. There was, a number of guys. Stengline was
Embley,
if you wanted to. Stengline was probably the constant. He was the one guy that was in there for a lot of it. He provided probably a few things that the rest of us didn't, with his just his size and then also his defensive attributes. But yeah, particularly like Judd, I really admired the way. From the moment he walked into West Coast, and by this stage I was the captain of the footy club, he was a very mature kid, but he came with a big rap, and never at any stage did it feel like, he always felt like I was talking to an equal, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. It was quite the opposite. But he also, from the moment he walked into the joint, he wanted to know who was the hardest trainer. He wanted to know, what they were doing, and he wanted to do the same, or more. And his approach to his footy, it never wavered. Whether he was the best first year player, whether he was an All-Australian, it wasn't that long after, he won a Brownlow or a Premiership player. He never ever wavered, and you get that with with the talent that he had, and we get this generational player. And it's sort of probably the best bit of advice that I could give young guys coming into the game is that the game is so hard and it's so competitive that if anything other than that, is gonna make life really hard for you. Nick Dacos can't afford to go, to Europe for 3 months at the end of the footy season and just, cut a few corners or just not quite do what he's done these last 2 or 3 years, because even he will find things will change pretty quickly, or you get found out. Now he looks like he's got enormous work rate, and he does approach it that way, but it's easier said than done.
It is, but that awareness is so true, and I think the best players have it in that it's whether it's fear of failure or whatever it is that drives you, but you can't. You're right, you can't afford to have that 1% drop off because the standard is so high, which is why it's so amazing to see when you look back at your career, 6 All-Australians, something like that means you've done it consistently at a high level for a long period of time. If you had to pick one season of your whole career, because you did play at a high level for a long time, which would be the year that you think stands out from a personal point of view?
If I had to say when I was the time in my career when I was at the peak of my physical attributes was I'd just done the pre-season for I think it was at the end of 06, so getting ready for 27 and
that's coming after a premiership win.
Yeah.
So that goes back to what you're talking about after the preparation doesn't waver after succeeding or anything.
Yeah, well, it was by that stage too. It was the training. I just really felt that I knew how to get the best out of myself. So I would do whatever the program was, but there was a number of things that I did sort of over and above that, that I thought one were important to us physically, but also from a mental point of view. They go, right, I've done that, and now I'm right to go. But it was in 07 that. The season hadn't started, so we played the 4 pre-season games. I played in 2 of them, and I felt, I was one of our best. But it was the time when, for a pre-season game, I just felt like I'd played 14 or 15 home and away games the way I was covering the ground. And as fate would have it, I ended up after that last pre-season game, a week later, woke up in America, in rehab, and was forced to sit out for 2/3 of the year and sort of deal with some personal things. But from a physical point of view, that that it's just something that stands out to us. Yeah.
No, I can relate to that. I think I had a pre-season in one of my best years when you within yourself, you just know you're covering the ground, or you feel stronger, or I know the feeling.
Different.
Something's a bit different. I know what you're talking about. And so what about, is there a particular game that stands out? We've spoken about a season, but what about, it is hard to pinpoint a game, but whether it's an individual game or a team win that, other than a final, that sticks out where you thought, this is me at my best today. There's always a game or two that stands out.
Yeah, probably the game that that I often reflect on, or it sometimes often comes up, is the year that we won the grand final in 06. It was the prelim final when we were playing away from home against Adelaide, another really good side. At halftime, we were 4 goals down, backs against the wall, and just to come away with the win, obviously gave us the opportunity to play in the grand final, but it really did require a heap of belief from within the group, which by that stage I think we did, but one that I'm pretty proud of to be involved in.
And they were always pretty low-scoring games. Like, I know the game you're referring to because I always watch the highlights still. It was like 50-50 or something, similar to the grand final the next week. So it goes to show that backs against the wall, goals are hard to come by. That was one of those games. When you touched on before about mental edge that you got from doing the extra work, if we get specific, so you mentioned mental and physical. When you say, let's use physical to start, what was it? Is it at the end of the program you've been given, you'd run an extra, 5 400s, or can you remember the specifics of what you would do?
The thing that I probably used to love doing towards the end of my pre-season, I would probably do 2 or 3 of them would be some lactate sessions. So sometimes it'd be after training, but it would only go for sort of 10 or 12 minutes, but maximal efforts. Often, would end up vomiting or whatever, and just gorges your body with lactate, which, and then I guess, teaches your body to be able to cope with being able to run with your body under that sort of stress or So yeah, it was a good one because it didn't actually. I didn't have to put too many miles or Ks into my body on top of what I was already doing. So it didn't knock me
More
around
about
from that.
the quality of work.
It was just the quality.
Yeah.
So those were the things that I got a lot out of. And then for me too, going back to the weight, is that pretty early on, I was quite strong for my size. So the programs that I would invariably be doing was similar to guys that have been there for 8 or 10 years that, it was just power related. Yeah. So it was just trying to...
You weren't trying to beef up, you were just trying to...
just wanted to stay, explosive, and that would generally help with pace and things like that I also used to work on, yeah.
And what about the mental aspect? What would you train in that space?
Well, I guess that, being confident or going into games with confidence, is really born out of the hard work or the preparation that you do. Pretty hard to manufacture. If you know you haven't quite been doing the work, as much as as well as anybody. But conversely, if you are doing it, it was just I used to love, towards the end of my career, I thought that I would prepare as well as I possibly could. I'd go, right, I've done the hard work. It was just a great way to go into your footy because all you can do is all you can do.
I
was really confident too that I could that I'd come off at the end of the game and there wasn't much else I felt like I could do from an effort point of view. And so anything that happens after that is really out of my control. And I used to think, I grew up a mad Gary Ablett Senior fan, and even he would have 3 or 4 quiet or bad games a year. And if it's good enough for Gary to have 3 or 4, it's unrealistic to think that I wasn't going to have at least 3, that many. So, it just took out all that. And it was just a great way to approach a footy, and it took a lot of the anxiousness or the worry out of the lead up to games.
We're going to the Brownlow tomorrow night. Who's your tip? Obviously, we touched on before, but Cribber can't be. He was actually meant to be. He's your biggest favourite player his whole life, but had bigger fish to fry, picking up cars and preparing speeches. But who's your tip for tomorrow? And then second to that, did it change your life winning the Brownlow in 05?
Well, my tip... Actually, I think that the top 4 or 5 fancies, I think, are all had amazing years, and all the big pollers too. Yeah. So I think
could be a record-breaking.
Yeah, it could be. I've been quite amazed at just some of the tallies the last few years in particular.
I was looking at when you won in 05, it was 20 votes.
20 votes, yeah.
Now they're getting 35.
Yeah, yeah. It really makes for an exciting count.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if Cripper, was able to win it again. I probably would like to see a Bont at some point win one. Same. I just think he's been that good a player. Yeah.
Too good.
I'd like to see him win one. I think Dacos will definitely win one. Yeah. Like if Cripper hadn't won last year, I'd probably be saying the same thing about Cripper. So, it's going to be a good night. Did it change my life? It probably, it has. I think it's one of those things that, has had greater impact on me or my life over time. When I won it, we were getting ready to play in a grand final. So I really didn't allow myself to get too caught up in it. I knew I'd had a pretty good year, but I also had played enough footy to know that on top of having a good year, you really needed a fair bit to go your way. So I didn't go in with any expectations. I was in Perth for the count and getting ready to play in the grand final. I did live at the time in an apartment right next to the Perth casino. It would have been less than 100 metres as the crow flies to the function that we had. And I just remember, obviously things sort of went my way and was lucky enough to win it, but I was at home. And not just at home, but at home, in bed, asleep before midnight. So I think it probably would have been vastly different had we not been getting ready for a grand final. But so I didn't, particularly that week, allow myself. I was in Perth, so I didn't have to. They couldn't get to me, from terms of commitments and formalities for the rest of the week. I was just allowed to prepare for a grand final. So it was great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great in that aspect. And you mentioned '07 before, obviously missed a large portion of the year, but you had that comeback game versus Sydney where there's some iconic footage of you actually start on the bench, which in those days, the stars don't start on the bench. These days, it's a bit more common, but you rip the jacket off, the crowd's roaring, and then later in the year, you play what is your last game for West Coast against Port when you do that hammy, which is also some pretty memorable footage of the camera down the tunnel and things like that. And what are your memories of that season where you've come off the Premiership? You obviously missed the portion of that season in '07, and then you come back and play some great footy, and then it ends on a sour note doing your hammy.
Yeah, well, I didn't know at that stage it was going to be my last game for West Coast. It was a pretty it was a crazy 12 months. It really was, off the back of the success, and then being removed from the program and sent over to America, and then coming back and even just trying to get back playing. And we just, I guess a few sort of things went against us towards the latter part of the year. I think Juddy had the groin issue, and we couldn't quite get him right, and he was really on one leg, and there's a few different sort of things that sort of prevented us from playing our best footy, but we were still a pretty handy side. And then I'm not sure exactly where the hamstring came from. I hadn't done one before, but talk about preparation, or although I kept up all my training, whether it wasn't quite the same when you left your own devices.
So even overseas, you were still training the same and things like that?
Yeah. So I was, I did run hard when I was away. It was probably that the running aspect was the one thing that part of the program that I was in that they made sure I was allowed to do. So I did go down to most of it was on an athletics running track, but it was probably the hardest month of running that I'd ever done. It was just a pretty good way to, just sort of, I didn't know what was waiting for me when I got back, but I just thought, I'll do that, and then it allows me to then just focus on the real reason while I was there, and then not get too worried about anything that was waiting when I got back home eventually.
Yeah, because it is hard to let go of those habits and routines, isn't it? Like as athletes, I've found this season missing basically an entire year of footy, and that's why I could imagine, coming to the end of the career or having these patches within your career where you miss portions of footy, you miss it. And because, like you touched on pre-pod, you've been doing this since you were 12 years old, training and discipline and work hard. And when it's taken away, it's like, it's tough. So to know that you're still doing it, you probably needed that for yourself as well as part of your recovery and everything.
It just allowed me to not get too worked up or anxious or worried or, about about what would lie ahead, in terms of my football. But when I arrived there, it was the first time in ever really that I had football, other than that training aspect, which was just really what I was left to sort of run my own program, which I did. But the first time that football was removed, because for a long time, how I assessed how my life was going was too heavily weighted in whether I was playing good footy or playing my role or contributing, So it was an important lesson that I had to learn the hard way, is that, whilst it was my priority, it was my livelihood, to do it in a way where, it came at the expense of other important areas of my life that at the time as a young kid, you sort of just think, you don't think anything of it at the time. And then for me, going there and then realising by that stage I'm a fair way down the path. It's just not quite that simple to go, right now I'll walk back and in this other direction. I was sort of in for a bit of a hell of a struggle really to sort of get things back on an even keel. So.
G'day guys, Tom Mitchell here. Over the years, I've relied on Iron Edge equipment to take my game to the next level, whether it be using the equipment in a professional gym. Collingwood Footy Club are actually building their new gym with Iron Edge's equipment, which is a good little side note, or whether it's with my equipment at home, I highly encourage you guys to get involved and purchase some equipment, whether it be racks, dumbbells, whatever you need for your workouts to take your game to the next level. And we're actually offering a discount of 10% using the code BALLMAGNETS at checkout. Get involved. Terms, conditions, and exclusions apply, but 10% using code BALLMAGNETS at checkout to take your game to the next level.
Have you got a mate who's always bragging about their latest NBA same-game multi-wins but never seem to have the good mail for yourself? Well, get them to jump on BuddyBet where the spoils can be shared. BuddyBet is your one-stop shop for social betting and has unique products like peer-to-peer, jackpot, and BuddyBet Golf that you won't find anywhere else. What are you really gambling with? For free and confidential support, call 1800-858-858 or visit gamblinghelponline.org.au. This episode is brought to you by Davos and Miles Wealth Partners. I've been with Nick and the team for a number of years now and predominantly my whole AFL career, and they've been so good in helping me learn how to save and plan for my financial future. You obviously want to be accumulating wealth in the background no matter what career you do. So I encourage everyone out there to organise a meeting with Nick and the Davos and Miles team. Whether it be purchasing a home or setting up your financial future, the Davos and Miles team are so transparent and helpful in doing so. I advise you all to head to the website davosandmiles.com to organise your meeting.
Yeah.
That's a good answer. And if we go back a year earlier, it was obviously probably the pinnacle of your career in 06, winning the flag. I've actually got a pretty good story for you just to take some spotlight off you for a second.
Yes,
but last year, obviously, was able to experience the highlight of that and everything that goes with winning a premiership. I'm not sure what you guys did post, but we were actually at the Osborne Hotel. A good friend of mine, I was speaking to him on the phone today. I said I would mention it. So we're at the Osborne Hotel, great part of South Yarra for no one that's been. And we had this private, not sure if you've been there, but there's like an outdoor area. It was meant to just be for players and partners and families and things, but they actually left the door ajar a little bit, and then these Pies fans have kicked it in and we've just been swarmed. It's turned into a party with basically the entire Collingwood cheer squad. So we had to get out of there. The after party only lasted about 20 minutes at the Osborne. But do you remember, what was the aftermath of winning the flag, and then was it a sense of relief, euphoria? What did you feel after achieving what you've always wanted to achieve?
Yeah, it was a mix. It was a mix of emotions. It really was. Relief was a big one because we'd lost it the year before. And just the disappointment and having to dust yourself off, knowing whilst we knew we were a good side, no guarantees of even making it the next year. And we were able to front up for pre-season and every other day after that to at least put ourselves in the frame. It's so much goes into winning one. They're so hard to win, and it really, like, everyone plays a role, and it's. But to win one over the course of those 12 months, that everyone's role's different. Some are high profile roles like a Chris Judd or whatever, but others are different and not quite as acknowledged, but all just as important. We win by a point or a couple of points.
Yeah.
Their role is no less important in us, achieving, and winning it. So that's the thing I love about it. And it's not just about, to get it right. You've got to get it right on field and off field, which we're able to do. And it's a common cause, isn't it? And it binds people, going forward.
Yeah. Do you still feel that today? Like you've stayed connected to those guys?
Yeah.
Like you mentioned last week, you chatted to Juddy and things like that. So.
Yeah. Oh, listen, it's been such a big part of my life, the relationships that you form and you're part of something,
Yeah, be there forever. What do you think? We were chatting about this before the podcast, but obviously that's an absolute highlight that you've achieved in your footy. And obviously every career has lowlights and challenges. But what do you think are the main challenges for current day footballers? Now that you can remove yourself, have a bird's eye view on footballers today, you see the pressure that they may put on themselves that you could probably relate to, or pressure they receive externally from whether it be media criticism or other things. But what are some of the challenges that you see?
Well, I think, the game is more competitive now. There's more scrutiny on it. Players have bigger profiles, all those things which have to be managed and kept in check. social media.
Yeah.
You
That probably
know,
wasn't around when you were.
no,
it
no,
wasn't as
you know,
big.
no. It's and with social media and things like streamer, these kids that come in straight from the draft, they've had nearly every game that they've played in the 2 years leading up, broadcast on streamer. So they come to footy clubs invariably with big profiles. In Perth, Harley Reid's come this year
In front of the paper every day.
Yeah, we haven't seen anything like it
No.
before, and thankfully he does look like a pretty happy, mature kid who's taken it in his stride. But I'm certainly not envious of the situation he's been thrust into. So yeah, I think, but resources that are available to players these days are probably also better than ever. To keep that in check, yeah. But it's not an easy situation because, guys that come to the club, they have to do a lot of growing up, in that environment. They don't come as, mature, worldly men. They're just boys yet. So it is tough.
And we touched on, you mentioned the word resources, and I sort of said to you how it works these days in that I would say every club has a full-time psych, or if not a psych that's there, for a big portion of time. And it's not uncommon to see players walking through, it's an open door policy, putting a number on a board, but that wasn't a thing in your day. And do you think that probably made challenges a bit tougher, that you had to probably deal with it yourself, or they were viewed differently because of the way mental health was looked at and perceived?
Yeah, well, I think, I'd like to think these days people approach it a lot more openly. Whether I've wanted it or not, because of the path that I've walked, I've had to get different forms of counselling and support, countless times, and have really leaned on it. It's been such an important thing for us. But for professional athletes, footballers, whether it's managing a life crisis, if you like, or it's just trying to find different ways to perform optimally. It's and sometimes that's just as simple as finding ways to make us happy and in a good headspace, so that we can approach our footy and play the footy that we want to. So
Definitely correlates, doesn't it? Like, if you're happy in life, you're probably playing better footy.
Yeah,
really. Yeah, it's
absolutely.
pretty simple formula.
Yeah, and even just learning to frame things a certain way. Disappointment, can often, you look back on in 2 or 3, 4 months' time and go, geez, that was that hardship or that thing that I had to go through, was one of the best things that happened to me, because it made me do this, or it brought this out of me, or it, those tough times do come to pass. It's not dissimilar, I think, to what you get out of a loss opposed to a win. You sometimes have to reflect a bit more. It hurts a bit more, and at the time, it's not enjoyable. But
to dig in a bit deeper.
Yeah, it's where it takes you.
Yeah, that's really cool. Have you found that in your personal journey that your downs have you just seem in such a great and happy place, and it's so good. Even seeing you yesterday, you're spending so much time with your kids, and you just seem so happy. And you talk about that roller coaster of life. Is that sort of, through your toughest times, has sort of managed you to bounce you to get to where you are now? Because it's always about living and learning.
Yeah. I think when we all have to sit down and assess our own lives, I think in its simplest form, it really, when you strip everything back, it sort of just gets back to what makes us happy. For me, for a long time, I wasn't happy, and it was a tough time. For large parts, I wasn't actually working, but I sort of wasn't on holidays either. And navigating my way through and out of that has been the hard part. But for a long time, it wasn't through lack of want, but it's more just the path you've got to uncover it as you go through it. But yeah, life is good. At the moment, it's just so different. Even the headspace I'm in is so different to some of the early years of my career when life was really good. You know, I'm as happy as I've been, I reckon.
You're dancing with the stars with Croft, who's in the room with us. Shout out to Croft. You wanted to mention, keep the Shane Crawford name alive.
Yes.
It's good to see you two bond over that. How was that experience? That looked like a bit of fun.
It was a lot of fun. I loved it, you know. And it was a big risk to take it on for me, just from where I've come from. And, you know, I did sort of surprise myself that I did even put myself in that situation. But it's been such a great reminder for me at my age to not, you know, continually play things safe and to not put yourself in a situation to learn, even just learn something new.
Yeah, that's good.
I love that, and it certainly hasn't been born out of me being some quick study to the dance, mate. I found it hard. It's been quite the opposite, actually. But you know, I couldn't.
You would
have
never
enjoyed
picture
it more.
yourself doing that. The start of your footy career,
you know, and if something like that didn't come along, I did know that, you know, it may never have, you know, that I would have put myself in a situation to do that. And I think down the track, it would have been something I regretted, or it would have been something that I looked at and gone, geez, it's pretty sad that I never even explored that. But the world of dance, you know, has been something it's been really cool to just sort of step into,
challenge yourself and test yourself
in so many different ways. But even just the people that I've met, you know, some that I haven't had anything to do with before, even just to spend time with people like Crawf and that you know, it's been a while between drinks, but it's been fun.
It's good to see, and it's good learning for everyone, really, that you know, you got to find ways to keep challenging yourself to stay motivated in different things, because we touched on, you know, staying motivated and doing new things, and also the challenging aspect that we all face. How challenging has it been, like being such a public figure from being such a star footballer, but having all of your challenges played out in a public sense? Is it something that, have you just become accustomed to it? It's just my life. That's how it is, or has it amplified the challenge, if that makes sense?
It's you know, basically from the beginning of my career, very quickly. Certainly the first 12 months that I was at West Coast, things happened really quickly, and I think I was under more scrutiny, particularly in Perth. My profile it seemed a bit out of whack, you know, for a long time, because I'd only just sort of stepped into playing, and
you were captain pretty young as well.
Yeah, and things like that happened. Yeah, it all happened really quickly. So from the beginning, I've had to learn to cope with it. You know, at times, you know, when things haven't been going well, it might have added a bit of extra stress. But I having sort of worked my way through that, and now in a headspace where I can sort of look at it a bit more diplomatically, you know, the game and people, you know, have been really good to us, you know, and particularly those times when I was struggling, far better than I probably would have afforded myself. So, you know, the football followers or supporters that I get to meet, you know, on a day-to-day basis have been really good to us. So, you know, I don't sit here in any way with a chip on my shoulder or whatever. It's quite the opposite, actually. I'm probably, you know, I've been lucky, probably the luckiest person I know, to be honest. Yeah.
And when you talk about like the space you're in right now and overcoming challenges and a transformation, if you like, and you've touched on sort of using resources, whether that be counselling or people to help you, how have you actually done this to get to where you are in the position now, being so happy and in such a good headspace? Because it's, you know, some of the positions I can gather you've been in before, it would have been really tough to get out of and be where you are now. So is there anything other than people and resources? Is it finding something within yourself? Is it finding purpose? Like what are some other things that have got you from your toughest periods to be where you are right now?
For a long time, it wasn't through lack of want, but just from where I found the space I found myself in, it's almost you can't picture or just see a path out to, you know, where I'm at currently, and there's no quick fix to it. It's the long game. So being even just prepared to do the long game, but you know, there was a number of things that I sort of went through. After being released the third time from prison, that some of them were just by chance. Other things, I sort of made a conscious decision to put myself in that situation. One of the first things I did, well before I was ready to start full-time work, was I went down to a local community footy club, one that I hadn't had any involvement with prior. So
you initiated that yourself?
Yeah, I did. A mate of mine, his brother-in-law was the coach, but that's really where the connection started and finished. And in the beginning, it was just going down once or twice a week, having a kick over the summer. Footy's been probably the longest constant in my life, so I enjoy having a kick. But other than that, I was out of my comfort zone, having to meet new people. Put myself out there a bit, and I have no doubt that I got more out of that whole experience than they did having me down there, no doubt. And it was just another reminder to me about, of all people, the important role that footy clubs play in people's lives.
Feeling connected and part of something?
Well, totally. And for me especially, connection with community, which at the time was important to us, isolated at different times, overcoming things like regret, shame, it's pretty hard to do that on your couch at home.
Yeah. You
sort of need to just work through that and put a bit of time and space between some of those things that sort of haunt you, and get back involved in the community. So that was really important to us. And then it wasn't too long after that I did find myself in a position to go and start some work, and I said earlier, there's been big chunks of the 10 years leading up to this point that I'd spent not working, but I wasn't on holidays either. It was this, it was a terrible sort of in between place that, I just wasn't happy. So I got to that point where I needed to be working, or I was ready to work. It didn't at that point matter what I was doing. I just needed to be doing something, so an opportunity came along, and then it was, at the end of a long day or at the end of a long week, I felt like no matter what I was doing, I justified my existence. And then it was, about what it did here, and then all of a sudden you can start to take yourself a bit more seriously, or a bit of self-respect, there's something important in that, and actually just getting back to some good habits.
Yeah, sounds like a real sense of purpose. Purpose is important.
Doing what you say you're going to do, being where you say you're going to be, and it's not just it's what you get in the way people start to look at you differently, but you start to look at yourself differently, and then all of a sudden, you've got something to hang on to. And it was a foundation, but it sounds, it's probably those two things I've just sort of said. They're lessons for young teenagers almost, and ones I've, learned or lived my life by for such a long time. But going away from that, or being in situations where it's just not part of my day-to-day existence, and then, you really notice it, getting it back, and it's, those two have been big.
Oh, that's really cool to hear. Thanks for sharing that. That was awesome. What about just through your experience, and hopefully this chat helps a lot of people, because I can gather through your lifetime experience without even realizing you're helping people just through sharing stories through what you've experienced. With your experience with whether it be alcohol or drugs or other things like that, what are some warning signs for friends and family, I guess, if someone finds themselves in certain positions where you mentioned the word isolated, or what are some warning signs that family and friends may be able to pick up on of someone going down that path?
Well, if it's, it can happen so easily. For me, early in my career, I really embraced that concept of hard work and throwing myself into my footy. But I think there's some things about my personality or my nature that predisposed me to feeling like I needed an escape or to to get away. And then I also think that the footy industry is a bit leans us to wanting to feel like that. I think all people. And that in itself isn't the problem, but for me, because I did that in ways that were going to, maybe not in the beginning, eventually would become problematic. In the beginning it was the odd night out drinking, with whoever. But pretty quickly for me, that didn't quite hit the spot, and it was taking something, and then. Yeah, everyone's path is different, but for me, it didn't happen overnight, and because my training, year in, year out, and even my performance, if you like, improved, that it reinforced some of these things that I was doing were not necessarily bad for me. It was sort of working for us, but, there was a bigger picture, and then eventually everything unraveled. But, I would just encourage anybody that, isn't either happy or, is keen to make a change. I know myself, I've been afforded not just a second chance, but a third, fourth, fifth, and however many more, because that's what I've needed it. And I've been so lucky that I've been given it, but I've also haven't been able to do it on my own. And I don't think you can. There's so many different resources in the community. That I would encourage, if even if you're, in two minds about whether to do it, at least go down and explore it. Yeah.
I think what you touched on before is so relatable I've got so many mates, as you do in footy, around the league who, that drive. I know exactly what you're talking about, that obsessiveness, that drive to be better, and guys find that release in different ways. And, it's a societal problem, whether it be drugs and alcohol, but it's also, probably a part of the footy industry as well, where you put so much pressure on yourself internally, external, and guys deal with things in different ways, so you can understand how it does happen. It's a really interesting topic.
Yeah, and I think if I had my time over again, I would just have loved to, before I went too far down that path, was just sat down with some different people. I'm not exactly sure who they would have been, professionals, if you like, that I could have thrashed out a few possible alternative ways to just get the same result or the same release or the same, feeling like I'd had an escape.
That's in hindsight. It's easy to say that now, isn't it?
But they're the sort of things that, we're talking about with resources today, and hopefully, seeing some things that happen to others is that there are other ways to do it, go about it. Yeah.
That's such a cool story. And I know you've got a flat out schedule while you're down here in Melbourne, Cuzzy. So just want to say thank you so much for your time and for sharing, because I feel like, whether you realise it or not, your stories and experience through, you still have people that look up to you, and to see you in the space you are now is, really both encouraging but pretty inspiring as well. So just really happy to see you happy, and thanks again for your time.
Thanks, mate. Been great to come in.
Hopefully Cooper gets a second chance tomorrow.
He'll go very close.
Yeah, we'll go close. Thanks again, mate.
Cheers, mate.
Ball Magnets, thank you very much for listening to this episode. We really hope you enjoyed it. And also we want to do a massive thanks to My Muscle Chef for jumping on board for the final series. Their meals are seriously tasty and healthy, obviously made by chefs, high quality food, which makes meal prep so easy to prepare for your week of training. If you want something higher in carb, they have it. Something higher in protein, they have it. And again, a huge discount available, guys. Get $120 off your first 6 orders using code BALLMAGNETS120. That's BALLMAGNETS120 at checkout. T's and C's apply, but head to mymusclechef.com to get involved. When I hit the golf course with the boys, we like to keep it competitive by having a friendly bet on who has the best score, longest drive, and even nearest to the pin. To place these bets, we use BuddyBet Golf. BuddyBet Golf allows you to bet against your mates within the app. Simply create your bet in the app, invite your buddies, play the round, and then declare the winner. BuddyBet Golf takes out the hassle of carry cash or chasing out the mate that stiffs you on a bet. We all know a few of those. Download the app today and give BuddyBet Golf a try.
What are you really gambling with? For free and confidential support, call 1800 858 858 or visit gamblinghelponline.org.au.